There is one chicken in my grandmother's pot this Sunday. One, a single hen, no bigger than a loaf of bread. And by the time the next Sunday comes around, that one chicken will have fed all 9 people in her house, not for one meal, but for the better part of a week. There is not a scrap left for the dog when she is done, because there is not a scrap wasted. One chicken, 9 people, 7 days. I am going to show you exactly how she does it, step by step, so that the next time you roast a chicken, you do not throw 3 days of meals into the trash without ever knowing they were there. My name is Edith Hartwell. My grandmother raised 7 children through the Great Depression on about $1 a day in a garden, and she could stretch a single hen further than any cook alive today. Everything I am going to show you, I learned standing at her elbow, watching where every last piece of that bird went. And I will tell you the part that ought to bother you. The grocery store and the drive-through sign have taught us that meat is cheap and endless, that you buy a whole roasted chicken. A family of 4 eats it in one sitting, and the bones go straight in the garbage. The Department of Agriculture says we throw away nearly 1/3 of all the food we buy in this country. My grandmother fed 9 people on what most families today scrape into the trash after Sunday dinner. She did not have more than us. She wasted less. That is the whole difference. Let me start with what most folks get wrong, because if you do not understand this, none of the rest will make sense. You think the meat is the meal. It is not. The meat is only the beginning and the smallest part. The real food, the food that filled 9 bellies for a week, was in the parts you have been taught to throw away: the carcass, the bones, the skin, the feet, the fat. Once you see that, you will never look at a chicken the same way again. So here is how the week went in my grandmother's kitchen, and it always began the same way. Sunday was the roast. The one day the bird was the star. She rubbed it with a little lard and salt and roasted it slow, and the whole house smelled like heaven. But here is the thing. 9 people did not each get 1/4 of a chicken. Each child got a piece, a small piece, the size of 2 fingers, and the plate was filled out with potatoes from the cellar, bread from the oven, and gravy made from the drippings. The chicken was the flavor. The potatoes and the bread were the meal. A child went to bed full on Sunday, and only 1/3 of that bird was gone. Monday the carcass went to work, and this is where the magic of the old way lives. She took everything that was left, the picked-over bones, the back, the wings she had saved, the skin, the neck, and she put it all in the biggest pot she had, covered it with cold water, threw in an onion, a carrot, a few peppercorns, and she set it at the back of the stove to barely simmer all day long. By supper, she had a gallon of golden chicken broth, and that broth was the foundation of nearly every meal for the rest of the week. There is more nourishment cooked out of those bones than was ever in the meat. The old people knew it. The gelatin, the marrow, the minerals. It all comes out into the water if you let it simmer long and slow. That pot of broth was worth more than the roast. And do not throw away the feet. I know how that sounds. But the chicken's feet, scrubbed and dropped in the stock pot, make the richest, thickest broth you have ever tasted, so full of natural gelatin that it sets up like jelly when it cools. My grandmother asked the butcher for the feet that everyone else left behind, and he gave them to her for nothing, glad to be rid of them. The neck the same, the back the same, The parts the modern grocery store grinds up or throws out were the most valuable parts to her. The giblets, the heart, the liver, the gizzard, that little paper bag of insides most folks toss straight in the bin. Those she chopped fine and cooked down into a rich gravy, or fried up as a small dish all their own. A chicken liver is a thing of value. On a poor farm, nothing with food in it ever went to waste. Now, from that one pot of broth, watch how many suppers she made. Tuesday was chicken and dumplings, a little of the broth, a handful of the saved meat she had picked clean from the bones, and dumplings made from flour and lard and a splash of milk, dropped in to swell up and fill the children. A few cents of flour turned a thin soup into a hearty meal. Wednesday was chicken and rice, or chicken and barley. The broth stretched with the cheap grain that swells 3 times its size in the pot. Thursday, a soup, the broth thinned with water and filled out with whatever was in the cellar: carrots, an onion, a potato, a handful of dried beans put to soak the night before. Each day the same broth, dressed a different way, and each day a pot of food big enough for 9. And the fat, she never let the fat go either. The grease that rose to the top of the broth, and the fat that rendered out of the roast she skimmed and saved in a crock by the stove. That is schmaltz, and it is liquid gold to a frugal cook. She fried potatoes in it. She greased the bread pans with it. She cooked the next week's onions in it. One chicken gave her not just a week of meals, but a week of cooking fat besides. And she never bought a can of shortening. She did not have to. By the end of the week, when the broth was finally gone, she would boil those poor bones one last time, a second weaker stock, and whatever sad little bits of meat were left got picked off and folded into a hash with potatoes and onion for one final supper. Then, and only then, were the bones spent. There was nothing left for the dog because there was nothing left at all. Every bit of nourishment that one hen could give, she had given to those children. Now think about what that means. One chicken, the cheapest meat there is, especially if you buy the whole bird and not the trimmed-up parts, fed 9 people, roughly 7 days. Sunday roast, Monday broth, Tuesday dumplings, Wednesday rice, Thursday soup, Friday a pie of the last shreds, Saturday a hash from the second boiling. That is the arithmetic of survival, and it is the arithmetic we have forgotten. And understand where that Sunday chicken even came from, because it tells you everything about how careful these people were. A hen was not bought to be eaten. A hen was kept to lay. For 2 or 3 years she gave the family an egg nearly every day, and an egg a day from a dozen hens is the cheapest, finest protein the good Lord ever made. Breakfast for 9, all year round, for the price of a little feed and the scraps from the table. Only when a hen grew too old to lay did she finally go in the pot, and an old laying hen is tough. You cannot roast her, she would be like leather. But tough old meat is exactly what makes the richest broth, simmered low and slow for half a day until it gives itself up. So the very same bird gave eggs for 3 years, and then a week of soup at the end. Nothing about that animal was spent until it was completely spent. My grandmother kept what the old cooks called a perpetual broth, a pot at the back of the stove that almost never went cold from one week to the next. Into it went not just the chicken bones, but every vegetable trimming the rest of the world throws away. The onion skins, the carrot tops, the celery ends, the outer leaves of the cabbage, even the water she had boiled the potatoes in. All of it simmered down into a stock richer than anything you can buy in a can today. When she dipped some out for a soup, she simply topped the pot back up with water and more scraps. That one pot was the engine of the whole kitchen, and it ran on what everyone else considered garbage. Now broth alone will not fill a working child, and the filling came from what was cheap and what grew. A handful of dried beans put to soak overnight turned a thin broth into a thick supper that stuck to the ribs. A scoop of barley or rice swelled to 3 times its size in the pot. Dumplings, nothing but flour, a little fat, and a splash of milk dropped onto the simmering broth, could turn the last cup of stock into a meal for the whole table for a few pennies. And bread, always bread, a bowl of soup with a thick slice of homemade bread to sop it up, is a full and honest meal, and the bread cost almost nothing to bake. The chicken gave the flavor, the beans and the grain and the bread gave the belly its fill. That is how one small bird stood at the head of a whole week of real suppers. She did not even waste the skin. The bits of skin and fat she trimmed, she cooked slow in a dry pan until they rendered down, the fat going into her jar of schmaltz, and what was left behind were cracklings, little crisp golden bits the children fought over, sprinkled with salt, the closest thing to a treat in a hard week. I remember sitting at her table, 8 years old, watching her divide one chicken among 9 plates, so that every single soul felt they had been given plenty. And the secret, the thing I did not understand until I was grown, was that the chicken was never the thing that filled you. Her cleverness filled you. The chicken was only the reason to gather around the table. And here is the part that carried that one chicken clear past the week, into the lean months when the hens had stopped laying, and there was no Sunday bird at all. What the family did not eat fresh, my grandmother put up. The best of the cooked meat she packed down into clean glass jars, covered it over with that rich golden broth, and sealed it. Canned chicken that would keep on the cellar shelf the better part of a year, without a lick of ice. And for the fat she had saved, there was an older way still. She would pack cooked meat down tight into a stoneware crock and pour the melted fat over the top until every last bit was covered, sealed away from the air under a white lid of lard. Potted meat, the old people call it, and it kept for weeks in the cool of the cellar, the way families had kept meat for hundreds of years before there was a refrigerator in any kitchen in this country, so that one hen did not only feed 9 people for a week. A little of her, put up in a jar and a crock, reached all the way forward into the dead of winter and fed those children again when they needed it the most. Nothing that could be saved for a hungrier day was ever eaten all at once. And that, more than any recipe, is the difference between a family that only just gets by and a family that is never once caught with an empty shelf. I want to leave you with the bigger picture because I think it matters. We are the richest country that has ever existed, and we throw away more food than most of the world will ever see. Nearly a pound of it per person every single day. We have been taught that food is disposable, that the bones and the skin and the feet and the fat are garbage. But there is no such thing as garbage in a chicken. There is only food you have not learned to see. My grandmother's generation could not afford to waste, and out of that hardship, they built a kind of wisdom, a respect for the animal that gave its life, and a skill at feeding a family that we have traded away for convenience and a full trash can. So here is what I want you to do this week. The next time you cook chicken, buy the whole bird, not the parts. It is cheaper by the pound, and it comes with everything you need. Roast it Sunday and serve it stretched with potatoes and bread not piled high. Then save that carcass. Do not let it touch the trash. Cover it with water. Simmer it all day with an onion and a carrot, and make yourself a pot of broth. Ask your butcher for chicken feet and put them in. Save the fat in a jar, and then take that broth and make yourself 3 more suppers from it: a soup, a pot of dumplings, a dish of rice, 1 chicken, a week of meals. See for yourself. Tell me in the comments how your own family stretched a meal. Every family has a trick, a leftover day, a soup their grandmother made out of nothing. I read every one, and I want to hear yours. Next time, I am going to show you how my grandmother baked fresh bread every single day, without ever buying yeast from the store, using a living thing she kept alive in a crock on the kitchen windowsill for more than 30 years, and fed like a member of the family. Until then, keep your pot on the back of the stove and your trash can empty. And remember, the people who fed this country through its hungriest years did it with their hands and their heads. And there is not a thing in that grocery store that can teach you what a chicken already can.